You're watching Global, and we often hear about damage that climate change is causing to the environment, but how about the risk it poses to global security? Well, a new documentary that explores the links between climate change and the threat of conflict paints a stark warning. It says that changes in weather patterns and rising sea levels could lead to refugee problems of unimaginable proportions. We're going to be speaking to two contributors to that film, The Age of Consequences, in just a moment. But first, here's a short clip for you.
Syria began to experience a serious multi-year drought in the winter of 2006-07, and that drought lasted for 3 consecutive years. Farming families just cannot survive on the land when a drought lasts that long.
As people try to feed their families and can't, they've got to go somewhere.
The drought caused a large number of young Syrian men in particular to leave farmland and go to the cities.
Damascus, Aleppo, 1.5+ million people had to move.
That has a major destabilizing impact when people have to pick up and leave, whether it's because of conflict or resource scarcity. As anyone can tell you, a bunch of unemployed young men in a major city is not a recipe for social stability.
It's an absolutely fascinating documentary. Let's speak to General Stephen Cheney now, who joins me in the studio, the head of the American Security Project, a member of the Department of State's Foreign Affairs Policy Board. Also joining us in the studio is General Muniruzzaman, who's a former military advisor to the President of Bangladesh and Chairman of the Global Military Advisory Council on Climate Change. And I'd just like to start with you first. As we see in this documentary, and we talk about climate change and security issues, one of the main things that can lead to is refugees. Huge amounts of people, as we already have, literally on the run. How does that lead to a security issue, though?
What happens is a combination of impacts of climate change on issues like food security, water security, their livelihood security, and many other factors will displace a large number of people. A major factor is going to come from the rising sea level, for example. Take the case of Bangladesh, for example, a most vulnerable country in the face of the climate change challenges. According to the IPCC's report...
And every year Bangladesh floods.
Every year, yes.
There's no surprise about it being a problem.
That's right. And according to the IPCC's report, it says that a 1-meter sea level rise will take out 20% of Bangladesh's landmass. Bangladesh, given its a small size with a large demographic size and a population, according to the country's strategy paper of Bangladesh, it will create a climate refugee population of something between 25 to 30 million people. Those are very large, massive numbers to work with. The world has never seen such large number of people being displaced and becoming climate refugees, and therefore it will not only have security impacts on the country, it can destabilize the region and have serious consequences for the international security system.
Okay, because borders have been breached, I suppose, governments become overwhelmed as well, and it creates tensions in regions.
It creates tension, it creates social tensions, there are spillover impacts due to the climate change and refugees moving to other countries. So it has serious regional implications security.
Okay. General Cheney, it was you in the documentary that said we're going to see refugee problems on unimaginable proportions. What we have to do, therefore, then, I suppose, is get governments to look at security in the area and try and stop the wars that people are fleeing from, as well as tackle the climate change. But not only have we got a climate change as a problem, we've got an awful lot of wars being fought at the moment.
You know, it's a complex problem, Chris, and we know there's going to be huge migration in the Sahel of Africa, for instance, with temperature ranges between maybe as much as 55 to 60 degrees centigrade. It will become uninhabitable. So he talks 25 to 30 million. We talk 100 to 200 or 300 million who are going to have to leave those lands and go somewhere. If you think you have a migration crisis now in Europe, wait till you see what happens in 20 to 30 years now coming out of Africa then.
So all we have to do is find peace in every single region and stop emissions into the atmosphere, and we'll be absolutely fine?
No, it's never that simple, of course, and we've already warmed up the globe, and it's continuing. If we don't stop it, it's going to be a problem. So yes, long term, you limit CO2 emissions. Near term, you help find settlements and places where people go and grow food for them and hopefully provide shelter. That's the adaptation part of it. But long term, it's a mitigation problem.
Okay. Let's talk Donald Trump, because according to Mr. Trump, people like yourself, are warmongers. We know he's a man that doesn't like conflict, but you're talking absolute rubbish. Climate change is not a human problem. It's something that we can't tackle or do anything about. It's just the weather. Are you worried about the Trump administration?
Well, let me start with your first comment. I don't believe we're warmongers. In fact, we're peacemongers. We'd rather have peace than war. All of the military folks would rather not have conflict. Now, I cannot predict what President Trump's going to do once he gets his office. He has made some rash statements about climate change. But as everybody is aware, he's backed off some of his statements during the campaign, and one of them is climate change. The last 2 weeks, he made a comment that perhaps there is an element of man-made contribution to CO2, and perhaps that's heating Earth. And so I see a slight opening here. He's a rational guy. I mean, he's extremely smart, extremely successful businessman. I do believe he'll listen to reason, and I think there's enough reason here to tell him.
There was an interesting, Munir, there was an interesting article in the New York Times yesterday that said, actually, don't worry about Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. Climate change and fighting against it isn't necessarily going to end with Donald Trump becoming president, because a lot of companies, a lot of countries, a lot of states are taking climate change into their own hands, and they'll carry on regardless of whether the Paris Accord is ripped up or not. Do you have confidence that the world is doing enough in itself?
I have confidence because I was in Paris myself when the treaty was signed, and most of the countries, for the first time in history, have signed up to the treaty. And most of the countries see that we cannot survive as a human race unless we take the impacts of climate change, particularly the seriousness of the impacts, very seriously. So therefore, we have the whole range of countries who have signed up, and they are acting on it. And I don't really think that a single country can have a total negative impact on that. And I also believe, like Steve, that at the end of the day, President-elect Trump will see the reason and stay on with the Paris Treaty.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, that's what everybody says when it comes to Donald Trump.
We can only hope for the best.
Yes, indeed. Brigadier General Stephen Cheney and Major General ANM Muniruzzaman, many thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Chris.
And joining us in the
Chris.
studio. Thank you. Fascinating documentary as well. Do check it out if you can.